Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Proudfoot podcast. Today, on our 24th episode, we are going to finish talking about weapon properties in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. So let's get started. Way back in episode 6, we did talk about weapons and their properties. However, I did leave out about half of them, and that is because they rely on some rules that we hadn't talked about yet. So that is knowing what a bonus action is, knowing the different sizes of creatures, and some stuff to do with the actions that you can take in combat. So now that we understand all of that, I want to return now to page 146, 147 of the Player's Handbook, where all of the weapon properties are given. So we're going to start with the first one that we did not talk about, which is actually the first one on the list, and this is ammunition. Ammunition basically says when you're using a ranged weapon, you are able to recover half of the shots that you dished out during combat as long as they weren't sunk into an ocean or burned up by some kind of fire. And the DM will let you know if the scenario of combat allows for you to recover it, but maybe you have to leave in a hurry. So you don't always get a chance to recover, but ammunition property basically says that you do get a chance if you're not rushing out or if they're not destroyed. The other thing about the ammunition property is you can use that weapon to make an improvised attack as a melee weapon. So an improvised weapon attack means that you find something the DM will permit you to use as an improvised weapon, and an improvised weapon always does 1d4 damage of whatever type the DM thinks is appropriate. So maybe you pick up a bar chair and whack someone over the head. That might be 1d4 bludgeoning damage. Or you grab a pointed stick and you throw it at a guy, because an improvised weapon can also be thrown for 20 to 60 feet. That's the regular range and then the disadvantaged range. And it also does 1d4, but maybe if it's a pointed stick, the DM will say it does piercing damage. Anyway, that is ammunition and also improvised weapons. And improvised weapons are at the bottom of page 147 and then continue on in page 148 if you would like to read more about that. The next weapon property that we did not talk about is heavy. Heavy simply says that if you are a small creature and you're using a weapon that says heavy next to it in the properties, you're disadvantaged on attack rolls. So if you're small, don't use heavy weapons. Then we have light, which interestingly enough is not the opposite of heavy. If you have two light weapons, you can hold both in each hand, one in your regular hand and one in your offhand. And then you can do two-weapon fighting, which is explained on page 195 of the Player's Handbook. And it says that if you take the attack action with a light weapon and you're holding another light weapon in your offhand, you can use your bonus action and make a second weapon attack. However, you do not add your ability modifier to the damage. You only actually add it if it's negative. It says that in the rules. So if your ability modifier is negative, then you do add it, but if it's positive, you don't. Also, if the weapon has the thrown property, you can just choose to throw it instead of making a melee attack. Then there's the loading property, which means that you have to spend your bonus action to put the next shot into your ranged weapon. That's all loading means. Next, we have reach, and reach simply extends your melee range by 5 feet. This also means that your zone of control has extended by 5 feet. So now if a creature passes by 5 extra feet away from you, you can still use your reaction to make an attack of opportunity against them now. Finally, we have the special property. So the special property says some weapons have the special property, and this is described later. And then you flip to page 148, and lo and behold, later comes, and we see special weapons. In the Player's Handbook, there's only two special weapons. This is the lance and the net, and they're explained right here. The lance says that you are disadvantaged on attack rolls with the lance if you're within 5 feet of a creature. So basically, lance is not good in close range. It's only good in a reaching range. You also have to use two hands to hold the lance unless you're on a mount. And we can think back to the jousting sort of genre in medieval times. They were only holding the lance with one arm and they're holding the shield with the other, but they really get to do that because they can rely on the horse momentum to just carry them forward. So that's the idea with the lance. Then we have the net, and the net is an interesting weapon because it is something you throw onto a creature with the attack action. And if you hit the creature, they are then restrained by the net. Restrained is a condition, and it says that the creature has a movement of 0, attacks against them are advantaged, their attacks are disadvantaged, and to top it off, they have disadvantage on any dex saving throws they have to make. A creature that is large or smaller can be captured by a net. Creatures that are huge or larger, or if a creature is formless like a ghost or a phantom, they can't be captured under the net. So only large or smaller. Then once a creature is captured under the net, they have a few ways of breaking free. Either them or one of their buddies can use their action to take a DC 10 strength check to break out of the net or free them from the net. The alternative would be that the net has an AC of 10 and 5 HP. So you can slash the net, which ultimately destroys it, does not harm the creature inside, and also frees them from the net. Now, the interesting thing about the net is that it takes up your entire action. So if you are a class that gets multiple attacks, if you take the attack action, the net circumvents that. So it means that if you take the net out and use that to try and capture a creature, that's your whole action. You don't get to then make multiple attacks afterwards, unfortunately. Okay, that is everything I wanted to talk about today with regards to weapon properties. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Eddie Proudfoot podcast. If you enjoyed it, please follow us on Instagram, Spotify, or Twitter. And as always, may the gods have mercy on your soul.